Mahmoud, it's a pleasure to have you. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Hussein. Thanks for having me. Really happy to be here.
Very excited for this podcast. When I was, I keep saying this, but every time I was thinking to myself who I wanted to have as a guest, I knew I had to have Mahmoud. Mr. Elmi, I'm going to call you Mr. Elmi. Someone I respect.
Mahmoud is fine. Mahmoud is good.
Someone who's making me feel underdressed today, but we're very excited to have you. So thank you very much for coming out. I know you're a busy man, and you have a family at home, so I very much appreciate this. So I'm going to start off from the bat. What was it like coming to Canada as a refugee? I know you have a very deep story, so let's get into that.
Yeah, thanks for having me again, Hussein, and of course I want to say hello to the ARK Center and the family and all the hard work they're doing in the community, ensuring they're getting a positive message to our to our kids and to our families and to every single person who benefits from a podcast like this.
We appreciate that.
So to go back to your question, as a refugee, I came to Canada, of course, as a refugee from Somalia. I left Somalia after the war. I ended up in a camp in Kenya, and after some time there, I ended up right here in Ottawa, and Ottawa is the place that gave me the start in life.
What year was that?
This was 1996.
Okay.
And of course, Ottawa South.
We're right in your home right now. We're in the south side right here.
That's the area that I ended up, and that led to going to Ridgemont High School.
Were you in Herongate?
Herongate, yeah.
Okay.
So that's Herongate, Cedarwood, Sandalwood area. So that's where I grew up.
With a rich basketball history.
Yes.
Those basketball courts. We touched on another podcast, but that's where little kids would watch their, the superstars, and we couldn't wait to get our turn to play. So, what was it like moving to Canada, being someone who English wasn't your first language? What was it like, and how did you find basketball? Was that an outlet for you to kind of connect with different people?
So certainly, I mean, of course, English wasn't my first language, and coming to new environment, just the weather alone, different culture. And at the same time, also people from different part of the world as well, right? So you have people come, that come from the Middle East, people from Africa, obviously people who are living in Canada already.
It's a very diverse area.
Very diverse area. So that's, that alone itself would shock some people. But then you add the weather in, you add a new language, so on and so forth. So basketball, it's, I remember when I first, started playing, it's sort of, even though you lack and some sort of communication skills, but that was an area where you can make friends, you can make new people, you can actually learn a little bit about the culture itself. So that's how it all started.
Did you have a big family that came to Canada, or were you guys smaller?
I came with my aunt actually.
Okay.
So we were 9 altogether. So yeah, it was a big family by.
Correct. It must have been a lot of fun growing up with a big family. But do you remember how old were you when you started to play basketball?
I actually started playing when I was 15.
Okay, so later in life.
Later in life, and this is why I said, I think I already had the drive. Obviously, living in the camp, losing some opportunities as a child, whether it was the war, whether living in that camp itself, you learn a lot, even though you grow up quick. So when I got here, I was committed and I was determined to do something.
So you were very mature for your age.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And even I remember the first day I was taken to school, Ridgemont High School. Of course, there was a lot of people from different parts of the world, including Somalis who immigrated to Canada prior to me. But even that was something new, right?
Correct.
New language, new everything. But I had the drive of doing something, and
Correct.
I think sport is where I find that balance.
Because it's not easy coming to a new country, speaking a new language. It's one thing when you come to a country at 4 years old. When you're coming somewhere at 15 years old, it's a very difficult thing. So it makes sense when you said basketball was that outlet that made you learn French. So did you just go try out for the team? Like, how did that come about that you got onto the team? Because Ridgemont had a really good team at that time.
So they had a really good team. And honestly, I picked up real quick. But it didn't happen by accident. I put in a lot of hours.
Okay.
Many hours. I compete with some of the best guys who played, but I put in a lot of hours. And a year and a half in, I was okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't like the most phenomenal guy.
But you were a key part to your
Yes,
team. You needed a guy like you.
But in fact, the year when I tried out for the middle school, for the junior team, I didn't make it.
Okay.
Because I wasn't there. But interestingly enough, then I was too old for the junior team, so I tried out for the senior team.
Okay.
And I made it. The following year. But I learned, even the year I got cut from that team, some of the things I've learned was attitude. Counts a lot.
Yeah.
I think even that year I sat out where I didn't make the team the first year. I've learned a lot, and what led to me not making the team, because I went back to the coach and I said, I didn't make the team. How
what can I do to get
about,
better and whatnot.
so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And part of it was what he pointed out was the attitude, and at that point, up to today, I realized no matter what we do in life in general, attitude and what you bring to the table,
correct,
really plays a huge role in what we do in general in life. And the following year when I came back to the coach moved up as well to be the senior.
Who's the coach?
Richardson. So
okay. Who was
and the guy who was coaching the junior team also came up as the
nice.
As the assistant coach to him, and I made it. And it went very well. And the following year, I ended up being the captain of the team. But part of it, I think, for me, was the attitude. And I've learned everything you do with the right attitude, you can do well. With the wrong attitude, even if you can be the best athlete,
correct,
the best person in whatever that you do, with the wrong attitude, there's very small chances that people would actually gravitate and work.
Correct.
Or even wanting to work with you.
Correct.
Yeah.
Now you talk about that Ridgemont team, and I'm going to use nicknames because this is how people are going to remember them.
Mm-hmm.
You got KFC and you got Beanie Man,
yes,
who are at the time the Somali superstars, right? Really good team.
Mm-hmm.
I think Ridgemont played in AA, if I'm not mistaken. So talk about that. Were you guys able to win? I believe you guys ended up going to OFSA. Talk about how special that team was and how that, even though you guys were a diverse group, how that brotherhood was.
Yeah. I have to go back. Obviously, this has been many years back.
We're talking 25 years ago.
But but when you look at it honestly, here you have, we were always the underdog, no matter where we ended up, whether it was playing in OFSA, whether it was playing in other schools, and people have perceptions about Ridgemont. Even up to today, when some people hear Ridgemont High School, it means something.
Yeah.
To them.
People might say it's an ESL school,
exactly.
A lot of immigrants. It's you got to be worried about it.
Yeah, but for me, even safety, some people talk about safety stuff.
Correct.
Some people talk about a lot of different things. But for me, Ridgemont means a place where I started my life in Canada. It means a place where I made some of my best friends that I have. It means a place that, gave me a start in life as a new refugee kid, from a different part of the world.
Yeah.
So even the word Ridgemont High School itself means different things. So to go back to the team, it was sort of like that always underdog attitude we had. Nothing was expected. Nothing more was expected from us.
And nothing was given to you guys.
And nothing was given to us either. So that's how we, that's how we perform in the way we played. It was that grind out, underdog style, never giving up, even regardless of what people thought about you or what they think about you. And that was the soul and the and the energy that carried us through many of the challenges. And some of the teams we played. You have Ashbury, who is a private school,
correct,
where many of the kids from affluent families,
correct.
When you walk into
top facilities at athlete,
so some of the places we go to, you will be very surprised. What we saw. But at the end of the day, we were never intimidated in different ways, because we knew not only do we represent ourselves, but we also represented the community, the school, and the area that we come from.
Correct.
And we knew that wherever we ended up, people always looked at us differently.
And how was Richard as a coach? I remember him, I went to St. Pat's, which was right next door, so we played each other. Like, we just walked over the school, and you would see him. He was a kind of a popular guy. He made himself heard. How was he as a coach?
So Richard Sutton, Coach Sutton is a legend. He coached and he continued to coach up to today. You have probably more than 40 years. But what I liked about him was he always expect a lot from himself, and he expect the same thing from his players.
Okay.
And the idea that even Coach Andy Waterman coached us with him at some point.
Yeah.
But the idea was always, when you played and when you participate in this games,
yeah,
you're not only playing for yourself, you're playing for not only, you're representing an entire institution, which was the school, not only that, but also the community.
Yeah.
And they've always used to remind us that people always expect us to fail, just because of the area, just because the institution we've won to. And that was what I like, the message that you have to ground yourself, you have to carry yourself, and not only
be a proper ambassador.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's but he definitely had an impact in my life in terms of coaching. We still stay in touch.
Nice.
I wish I had a bit more time now to help coach as well, but he was definitely had an impact on all of us, all the guys that played.
Now, we touched a bit on sports and basketball. We're going to come back and talk a little bit about your officer run. But what about you as an athlete? Did you have kind of the vision of what you wanted to be? I know coming to Canada as a 15-year-old, as a refugee, you might not have mentors per se in the community that have been through life in Canada. Mm-hmm. Did you have an idea of what you wanted to become when you wanted to go to school after? Did you have any idea what you wanted to be?
So I for sure, sport it still is a big part of my life. Part of who I am, and for me, obviously, as not a big guy as you can see. Of course, everyone has the dream of going.
Of course, if you would have asked us if we could have played pro, of course.
Everyone.
If God could have created a 6'3", 6'4", we would take it.
Exactly, but even that, as a shorter guy, point guard guy, there was always that underdog attitude that I had. But definitely, I knew I wanted to play. College. Even beyond. But I also had other responsibilities, and that was family responsibilities.
Okay.
As like I was telling you, as a new person, as a new Canadian that came here, there was also that responsibility to give back home.
Okay.
And people who were, having different challenges that we were having right here in Canada. All the opportunities that we were giving. Going to school, having a health, having free health care, safety, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So I knew the people I left back home were struggling for some of the things, some of the basic and good things that we have here. So some of that responsibility was on my shoulders. So even I had an opportunity to play in Kingston, the St. Lawrence College basketball team.
Yeah.
But I ended up not going because other priorities were there. But I never stopped playing, and I truly believe. Had I not continued to play or continued to even early on in my life sport, whether it was the community teams that I play with, whether it was the high school teams I play with, whether it was other places that I play with, I don't know if my life would have turned out the way that it turned out.
Okay, so you play. Let's touch a little bit on that. The underdog mentality and you guys going to OFSA. Did you? I don't know if we confirmed. Did you guys win the championship that year, or was it?
We didn't win, but we certainly made noise.
Okay.
And of course, I think we were good, but just being good doesn't get you also to the top. I mean, you need a lot of help all around. But I think certainly we've made a name for the school. We made a name for for the not only the school but also the community that we represented. Yeah. And we ended up going back to back years two different obviously areas. But certainly we didn't win. But I say we've given our best shot, and we've learned a lot from those from the people we played against, because they've come from different part of Ontario.
Yeah.
And certainly those are, even though we didn't win the championships, those are memories that I will always cherish.
For sure.
Having your name at the school, also
on the banners,
it's something that will always be there. Something you can you'll show your children, and every single person that plays in that facility will always see it.
Exactly.
And I honestly think even up to today, almost 20 years plus, people still talk about those teams, because and part of it is honestly what it was is people expect less from us. Is you have a scrawny kids who are from a rough neighborhood, who are going to a rough school, nothing was expected.
Okay, you didn't grow up playing organized basketball. Exactly. You didn't have that structure. You guys kind of figured things out on your own. So it's a really good story. And the era that you talk about was a really big era of Ottawa basketball. You had a lot of powerhouses, a lot of guys that ended up playing basketball after high school, playing pro, guys that played against. So that's very interesting. So you touched on how you went to St. Lawrence College. I asked you the question about what you wanted to do and whatnot. Did you know you wanted to be a police officer? Was that your goal?
When I was in grade 12, that's when I decided. Actually, that's what I wanted to do. Of course, I retire now, but definitely that's when I decided to join. And I knew I wanted to serve, and I wanted to give back to the community I grew up in. And I wanted to contribute also to my new home as Canada. And I made that commitment, I moved, and I took the Police Foundation program. I was very successful, and when I came back, I was fortunate enough to get hired actually by the Ottawa Police Service as a civilian member initially, and after a year, I ended up joining as a police officer.
Now, looking back, obviously, it's a joy of having a career like that. What was the reaction of your family? You know what I mean, of you becoming joining the Ottawa Police Service? Like, what was it like?
Actually, initially when I told my family I was going to become a police officer, a lot of people couldn't quite understand. Of course, everyone has a different vision in terms of what policing is like, or what law enforcement. And you have to keep in mind also a lot of people that immigrated to Canada did end up leaving because they were prosecuted by authorities in one way or another. And sort of like, so there was always that suspicious, so there was always that pushback especially when it comes to policing in different part of the world, the way policing works. So I had that to overcome, but once I decided and I put my mind in it, it was certainly not an easy journey to join. Not only that, but to stay for many years. But it was a heck of a ride, and it was something that if I had to do it again, I certainly would do it. And my main thing was honestly to contribit in one way or another. To from safety perspective, from also showing others, it doesn't matter where you start in life, and where you came from, or if you want to do something within your life. And for me, again, it goes back to the sport. Being in that team environment, expecting a lot from yourself, challenging yourself, not giving up on yourself when others are actually doubting you, and holding yourself responsible. Holding yourself responsible. And have when you say you're going to do this, do it. Have be a man of his word. Keep that word to yourself. And to go back to that, like grade 12 is when I decided, and I'm glad the journey worked out for me. And there was a lot of bumps on the way, a lot of challenges on the way. But eventually, all those obstacles were overcame.
So, you talk about, when your name is mentioned in your community, and in Ottawa South, it holds stature. People respect you. Did you know that you were going to have kind of like a role model effect to the Somali community, to Ottawa South, to immigrants being a police officer, being, at that time, I'm assuming the force wasn't as diverse as it is now.
Mm-hmm.
Did you feel that responsibility? Were you welcoming that responsibility, or it never really crossed your mind?
And not necessarily, to be honest with you. And I still honestly don't say that I'm really a role model. But one thing I knew was, and up to today, everything I do, I know it's not just about me.
Yeah.
You're carrying a flag of many generations that comes after you. And I've always looked at it that way, that I'm not only representing myself, but there's many people who do want to get to different levels that might, for one reason or another, they might never get there. And you represent them, and you do it on their behalf.
Yeah.
And I've always looked at it in that angle, that when people see, Mahamud Elmi, they're not only seeing Mahamud Elmi, but they're seeing many Mahamud Elmi plus others.
Yeah, no, so it's a good way of representing it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know that you're a retired police officer now.
Mm-hmm.
What was the highest level you got to in the force? And, you talked about how sports allowed you to get there. Maybe talk about, that underdog mentality. Did you keep that chip on your shoulder to continue to grow within the force, or was it just a natural progression at that time where you knew you were good and you knew what needed to be done?
No, definitely. Again, what I learned through sport, it's up to today, it's what I use to navigate through life.
Yeah.
And I talked about the attitude. Your attitude counts. You can't really control sometimes what other people do, but you can control what you can do. And then you talk about, we played in games where you have people. Sometimes you might be the first guy that gets fouled.
Yeah.
But the ref might not see that. That there was, the guy or whoever the girl did foul you.
Yeah.
But if you retaliate, or they might catch you, or they might see you doing it. You could end up in a team that's maybe it's not the best fit, but your attitude can make a huge difference. So what I learned through sport, I certainly, and I told you at the beginning, where I was, where I ended up not making the team. Part of it was because, as the coach said, it was my attitude and how I looked at things. So that really stuck with me. And I when I joined, of course, Ottawa Police, I finished in the rank as a sergeant. The
first Somali-Canadian.
First Somali-Canadian police sergeant. Yes.
Yeah.
And this was 2016 when it happened. And certainly to have my kids, to have my my family, my wife, my aunts, my uncles, and many other friends who were there to witness that was definitely a proud moment, for me, and of course everyone that helped me along the way and supported me. And when I was in the police service initially, of course, it wasn't as diverse as it is now.
Yeah.
But I always say again, your attitude, like people are people regardless of where you end up. And if you can do the work and you can do your best, and I think it will work out eventually.
Now, I can only imagine how many people reached out to you for advice or how to get into the police force. I won't put you on the spot for that, but I can only imagine. Yeah. But another thing you are very proud about is continuing to learn. You talked about that off camera about how it was important to continue to learn. I'm just reading this. In 2016, you completed your master's in public ethics at the University of Ottawa. Mm-hmm. What was it like for you, looking back, someone who came to Canada as a refugee, went through all that he went through, to look back and say now that you have your master's in something? What is it? How proud of you were you, that proud that you had your kids with you, not only with the police accomplishments that you have, but your educational accomplishments as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, certainly. Education, it meant a lot to me, and I went back to school actually during my policing career. I've actually, that's when I got my undergrads from Carleton University in sociology. But working night shifts and going to school, but I had that commitment. I really wanted to do it, and I wanted to also to show that education, education even with athleticism are very similar.
Yeah.
And the more you educate, the more you educate yourself, and the more you'll create opportunities for yourself. That's how I sort of saw it, and through that, that having that education, doing my undergrads and then doing my masters, we're also a sort of a journey of saying it can be done. It's quite possible. It wasn't certainly easy, but I knew that it would open up other opportunities for me, and eventually it led to
which we're gonna
it did lead to other opportunities to move on to.
Which is great. I'm going to touch on a bit of these awards that you won. I know you don't like to gloat or so, but I really want to touch on this because it's very important to highlight this. And you mentioned that you weren't a role model, but you'd be surprised of what people speak about you. And when I've tried to talk to other people of who I should get as a guest, your name came up multiple times, right? So you are a role model, whether you want to admit it or not. So, you won the Crime Prevention Ottawa Award, Community Safety Award, Intercultural Dialogue Institute with the Ottawa Public Hero. Sorry if I'm making mistakes. Queen's Jubilee Medal, Ottawa Police Community Award, the Chief's Coin, Human Rights and Race Relations Gold Medal Award, and the Global Community Alliance Professional Achievement Award. So congratulations for all that, because it's great to, with, like you mentioned, coming from Ottawa South, hearing a lot about crime from people talking about, Ottawa South, you got to worry about where you're going. There's a lot of crime. There's a lot of this. There's specific names that come up when there are crimes, which is an unfortunate thing. So I congratulate you on that. And you talked about moving on in your career. And I think now you have a very unique role, and we'll touch on it briefly, but you're a Justice of Peace with the Ontario Court. And that's another step and something that is amazing. I'm assuming, I don't think any other Somali has ever been in a position like that. Do you want to touch on, what it means to be in a role like that? And then we can kind of talk about the foundation that you're very proud about as well.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you, Hussein, for yeah, certainly. So I was appointed recently, last June 2021, to the courts as a Justice of the Peace. And this is another way of serving, of course, my new home, Canada, as well as the community at large and our society at large. And serving, serving obviously Ottawa in general as as a public servant, as a police officer for more than 17 years, 16 years altogether with my civilian time was great. So this is a new way of serving the community, and also showing people that and others that it's quite possible to work towards your dreams, so to work towards making contribution while you're impairing yourself, making contribution to both this great nation and our community.
Awesome. I can imagine people that come up in front of you are probably embarrassed where people from our community come up and see you. So it's probably some funny times as well. But let's talk about your involvement with the Somali Hope Academy. I know this is something that's dear to you. It's kind of you talked about earlier about giving back early on in your life. You had some responsibilities of giving back home and helping family members. What does this foundation mean to you? Talk about how it came about, your involvement in it, and what exactly it does.
Yeah, so the Somali Hope Foundation, it's so like I said, after I left Somalia, the civil war, I ended up obviously here in Canada, like we talked about.
Yeah.
So I went back for the first time after being away for about 17 years.
Wow.
And I met, my mom, actually. She still lives there, as well as my father and some of my siblings. So when I went back at that time, I've seen a lot of things. People obviously facing different challenges we face here. And one of the things that stood up for me was the amount of children that didn't have an opportunity to actually go to school.
Yeah.
And I always believe, I always say to people, it's good to see things for not what they are today, but what they can be tomorrow. And what I mean by that is, if you look at a child, you look at what I talked about, my experience growing up in the South. When people looked at us, me and my friends playing basketball, perhaps in their mind they might think that, these guys might not end up anywhere in life. Yeah. They might end up in whatever their perception might be.
Yeah.
So for me, going back there, when I saw those children, I said, this could be the next doctor, maybe your next police officer, maybe your next soccer player,
Yeah.
Your next doctor. But opportunity was lacking, and that is because that opportunity didn't. It's not something that they brought up on themselves, but it's more of where they grew up.
Correct.
Where they happen to be in part of the world. I asked some of the community members and some of the elders that lived in that town, and I said, if I was to go back to Canada, what message would you like me to take back to my community and to people that live in the community that I live in?
Yeah.
And they said, school. We would like a school for the children. And when I came back, I shared my, the story, what I witnessed, what I saw with people, and I'm quite surprised. A lot of people, many people, including yourself, Hussein, many people who said, yes, we like to join and we like to support and we like to help. And so that was 2008. Move back, you look back now, move forward to 2022 we're in. We've built the school, the school now serves 848 students, wow, boys and girls alike. We had our first graduates from high school. Kids get very quality education. So it's possible. Yeah. But at that moment, when I was, when you look at 2008 and you're like, oh my God, I have nothing to do with schooling. I never built,
Yeah.
But it's the drive, it's the will. It's possible that, if people are giving chances in anywhere in the world, I think it's quite possible. And my hope is that kids that come from this school will be huge contributors, not only into Somalia as a country at large, but I think to the rest of the world as well. They're very bright, but people just need that opportunity and the chance to really have a chance just as much as we do here in Canada. And I believe education. That's why even when I was going back to school, if I'm going to talk about the importance of education, then I have to be able to walk the talk, right?
Exactly.
And as challenging that it was, that's why I went back to university to do my undergrad, to finish my master's, because I wanted to also demonstrate that this is quite possible, that it can be accomplished. And education, it's really important. It opens up opportunities.
For sure. And it's very remarkable you talk about that. I mean, I can see the passion that you have in talking about this story. But, how did it feel? We won't go too much into it, but how did it feel to see those people graduate? Like, were you able to go back after the fact and visit? Like, what was that sense of joy that you had to see that vision coming about and seeing, your first graduation class?
No, unfortunately, Hussein, I didn't go back because of the COVID restrictions.
Correct.
So the first graduates graduated in 2019, 2020.
Okay.
2021.
Okay.
Which is last year that passed us.
Yeah.
They're all in university, by the way. All the kids that graduated,
Nice.
all of them ended up going to university. But I would have loved to. We saw the videos, we saw the ceremony. But I would have loved to taken part of it. But hopefully next year, when the other ones graduate, it's will be the ones. But the hope is that this children that graduate from this institution, like I say, will make a huge contribution, not only in their community, not only in the country, but hopefully to the rest of the world.
I'm sure
Mm-hmm.
they will be. I'm sure they will be.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing, and I don't want to forget this as well, in the sports side, the Somalian Youth Basketball League. We had another guest talk about it briefly, about his coaching experience, Alain Kadir. Talk about how that came about and what that meant to you as well.
Yeah, so the Somali Youth Basketball League actually existed for, we started in 2004, 2003, I believe. And it came about an idea of how do we create an environment where, especially youth that live in neighborhoods that are challenging.
Correct.
That are not, their families are not, doesn't have enough money to put them through club teams.
Correct, because it is expensive.
It's very expensive.
Yeah.
And I knew, and there was a bunch of us, actually, there was about 6 of us, I think, that sat around that table and sort of designed the idea. But I knew I missed that opportunity. I always say, if we had a chance to, to play in club teams, to people invested in us, perhaps even our lives could have been maybe different.
Sure.
On a next level. It could have been taken. No, of course, So we said, how do we give a lot of these youths to an environment where they feel home? And it says Somali Youth Basketball League, but kids from all across.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, I think as a French Canadian coach.
All kids from different part ended up playing.
Yeah.
And the idea was, it had two phases. One was we give a safe environment for these kids to play. They come, they play, they have fun, but also we keep them busy.
Okay.
Right. So on Fridays used to be practice. So all the kids, and these are kids from. And another part of it was we also knew there was a tension among kids, among youth growing up. So whether they live in Ridgemont, Ramsey, whether they live in Ottawa South, whether they live in Overbrook, there was sort of like that, different territories. But we said, how do we also get rid of these boundaries?
Correct.
How do they make friends? That.
Because life is all about networking.
Exactly.
Who you know,
how
right?
Because some of these kids sometimes don't. Some of these youth don't end up leaving from Ottawa South.
Correct.
So that's their world. So they think maybe the whole world revolves the way Ottawa South is. So we said, how do we bring them all together? And I remember we used to run the games at Lisgar High School, and we picked Lisgar High School intentionally because that was more of like a central place where kids they can take the bus, get off a Rito, everyone comes into that environment. But the idea, so you had, saying it's a very good question. They had two phases. One was, how do we keep them busy? So they practice on Fridays. Saturdays, the entire day they're playing.
Yeah.
So the only day they had left was Sundays.
Yeah.
So it was almost like a full, and it was all.
So it was intentionally done this way.
Yeah, it was very well put together. He actually the program ran until 2014.
Wow. Okay.
From 2000 over 10 years.
And this was funded by donations.
So we had some partnerships. The school board, the police were a big part of it as well. The community were a big part of it. But mainly it was built on volunteers. So coaches, people who were volunteering their time, of course, Friday and Saturday, your entire weekend you're volunteering because you're coaching, and then on Fridays you're doing practice, and then Saturdays you're doing the entire game. But it was one of the most remarkable. I've met some of the young guys who played in that league who are grown men now.
Correct.
And believe me,
makes you feel old.
I will. Yes, I will. I will. And I run into them sometimes and say, "Hey, you don't remember me," But believe me, Hussein, some of the guys I've seen told me that, I was so glad I participated in that, even though they had their own high school teams.
Correct. And you had very good players that played
in that league.
Yeah.
They said, because I made friends from across the city.
Yeah.
I made friends from different, from across the city. From, kids from, Richie were friends with kids from the Ottawa South. Kids living from Ottawa South, like friends with Overbrook. So you have, and a lot of these kids are coming from bit challenging neighborhoods. They're facing the same challenges, but sometimes they would turn on each other, and if they didn't know, because they didn't know each other. But in this environment, you get to know, and eventually we made it in a way that kids, youths can actually trade. So you're allowed to be traded.
From team to team.
From team to team, NBA, sort of like an NBA. So it was.
It's funny because today is the NBA deadline.
Yeah,
it was a trade deadline.
It was. So it was phenomenal experience, and really, I've learned a lot from running that league itself, from organizational, how do you organize things, how do you deal with conflict, how do you bring people together, how do you mobilize communities, even learning from that was part of the thing that helped me build this school in
it's a
Somalia.
Good point. Now I'm going to touch on one thing. It's not really a question, but you mentioned about different areas, and as a basketball player, you hear of this guy, this guy's from this area, and automatically you don't like him because you don't know him, he's from this school, and you don't want to get to know him. And then if you do play him and you see him as a person, your mind kind of changes. So that's a good point, because we've all realized that. We used to hear about, this player is good, but he's in the West, or this guy's good, he's in Orleans, but you were like, no, he's not that good. So it's good that you brought these people together.
Yeah.
I want to ask you something before I ask the question to everyone is, how did you find time to do all this? You talked about being a family member, being a family man. You had a wife, kids. You went back to school. You were doing volunteer work. You were doing, building a school in Somalia. Like, how did you find time, or was it just that drive to better your community, to give more opportunities to everyone? What motivated you in that sense? Real quick.
Yeah, no, good question, Hussein. I think when you're doing it, you don't really think about it. But the truth is, when a lot's given to you as a person, a lot is expected from you as well.
Yeah.
I believe that. I believe that the more you give, the more you get. That's just the way life works. And just because you made it, you're doing well, that doesn't mean every single person made it, and every single person maybe were given the opportunity that were given to you. And I think the responsibility is, I at least for me, I always say, if I live, if I was a Spartan, if I was a Ridgemont High School graduate, I will always be proud of being a member of, someone who graduated from that school.
Yeah.
If I was being from Somalia and growing up, I want people living in that country doing well and having just the same opportunities that I have. If I was a police officer, I wanted to do the best job that I can do as a police officer and have an organization that functions and works well. The job I'm doing now as a justice of the peace, same thing. Nothing less is expected from me to contribute, to make a difference, but not to forget where I came from as well. And when I say where I came from, is you have to give time. You have to make time. There's no time. That's free laying around.
Yeah.
You have to make time for people, and you have to make time to contribute to the best of you can. I'm not saying you kill yourself, but there's always that time to lend a hand in one way or another that you can. And you don't have to build school. You don't have to.
But it might just be volunteering as being a coach. Exactly.
Helping kids, how to read. Volunteering, in the community, maybe 1 hour a week.
Yeah.
Giving time to to someone, an elderly person who does not have a companion who needs help. All these things are needed in our community. It's out there. Like people really are. In it in different ways, and we all have something to give. No matter what your situation is, we all have something to give.
Exactly. So I'm gonna go to, well said. I'm gonna go to the question I ask everyone, and it's kind of like the show or the series' question. If you can go back in time, 2-part question. If you can go back in time and give yourself, your teenage self, advice as an athlete, and give yourself advice as a student, what would that be? Looking back with all the wisdom that you have now.
No, definitely. As an athlete, for sure. If I can grow taller, I would.
I'm still looking for that. That recipe.
No, I'm kidding. I would say, of course, I wish. I would always say, when you're young, you look at things from different perspective. But, obviously being more patient with things, working harder, certainly, would be one. And from a schooling perspective, certainly, man. I mean, enjoy the time wherever you are, whether at high school or you're in university, because those times will pass, and make the best of it. For sure, I would have, that's what would have been. Enjoy the time, make the best of it a bit more.
I know that we didn't. We spent some time on basketball. I know Mahmoud really loves basketball. He still plays in men's leagues, even though, how old are you now?
41.
41. So you're still going against the young guys. I'm 35. So we still have that passion, right? If you would have asked us if we would have loved to go pro, of course we would have loved to go pro. But Mahmoud, in all seriousness, man, it's an honor to have you here. I talked about you being a proper role model, someone who gives back to his community, someone who's built a school, like just by saying that, building a school. And I didn't know the size of it, that you've had over 800 students. I mean, it's really heartwarming. And whether you like it or not, man, you are a role model. I wanted to make sure to highlight your story because your name kept coming up. When I talked about what I want to do this, many people mentioned your name. And I know the sky's the limit for you. I don't know what it is. I don't know what you're planning to do, but I know you're going to be continuing to do good things. And I'm sure those graduates of your school as well are going to be continuing to do good things. So I really appreciate you coming onto the podcast. Do you want to give any shout outs to any mentors you've had in your life that may not have heard it from you, but someone you want to get, a couple of people that you can give a shout out to real quick?
No. Thank you, Hussein. I really appreciate Hussein for you having me, and I look forward to seeing you on the court
soon. Hopefully soon.
Hopefully when things open up. I honestly don't want to say too many shout outs because it's
it can go on for a while.
No, you're bound to miss somebody.
Yeah.
But certainly, of course, for me, my wife, and you asked the question, my wife and my children for sure have sacrificed a lot of their own time.
Yeah.
For to allow me to do some of the stuff that we talked about doing, and I thank them for being my rock and being and understanding that they're giving up their own time and allowing me to share it with others.
Correct.
Of course, my high school coach, Mr. Ridgemont, and every single person that contributed, my teachers, and I know we didn't talk about it, but when I was a police officer, I actually went back to Ridgemont High School as
I wanted to talk about that.
As a school resource officer.
Correct.
Who actually worked within the school.
Yeah.
So some of my teachers were still there.
And that must have been an amazing feeling.
Amazing feeling, and really, it was really good. Also, what they did for me as a new refugee kid who barely spoke any English, how they believed in me, and then coming back as an officer and working alongside of them, and problem solving alongside of them was truly remarkable. My high school teacher, who is the principal now, I think at one of the schools in Ottawa Police School Board, Mr. Richard, who was his name, Richard King. I thank him for his support and help all along the way.
So listen, man, this has been a great episode. We might have to bring you back to our next series on some different things. So yeah, we're gonna keep you close. Don't worry. We're gonna try to milk a bit of that time that you have. So we'll share probably a link to to your foundation in Somalia, and if anyone wants to donate, feel free. But it's been a pleasure. So I thank you very much for joining the podcast, and it was a pleasure to see you. And you had to make me look bad. You're all dressed up all nice. So hopefully my producer didn't show me too much, but I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. This is, I think, one of my first podcasts. So I'm looking forward to it. Thank you very much.
They say you never forget your first time, so don't worry about it.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it.